welcome back to another episode of Just Another Autism Podcast. I'm Eileen Lamb, and today I am joined by Tiffany. You might have seen her on the Netflix show Love is Blind. She found love on the show, and she is an autism advocate. She has a little brother on the spectrum, and she's been a fierce advocate for our community. She's also part of Autism Speaks Team 20, and she's a travel content creator and entrepreneur. And she's about to tell us everything about Love is Blind and her little brother with autism. Welcome, Amy. Hi, Amy, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Of course, we're excited to have you. So before we get started, I want you to tell us a little bit about Love is Blind and what inspired you to go on the show. Like, was it a spur of the moment? Is it something you've always wanted, or what was it?
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of a spur of the moment, but at the same time, I had applied right when they were scouting here in Charlotte. I hadn't really heard of the show prior to this was back in 2022, so only 3 seasons were out. And my friends knew of my dating history and they knew that I was very marriage minded. And they were like, this is a good opportunity. You never know, you could find the love of your life. And so I was just like, I don't know if that'll end up happening to me, but you never know. So I applied, but I didn't really think that I would actually get selected because it's such a rigorous process. And so many applicants are, considered. So I didn't think that I would make it to the final, let alone even find the love of my life in the process. But I also had the hope that it could happen because through the interview process, they had asked me if I had watched the show, and I said, no pun intended, but I wanted to go into the experiment blindly. And they were like, well, you should see what you're getting yourself into. And so when I saw the first season and I saw the couples that came from it, specifically like Lauren and Cam, which I feel like are so highly talked about because you see how pure their love is. Also, the other couple, Amber and Barnett from that season, like it just showed that genuine, true connections can form if you take the experiment seriously. And so I just had the mindset that if they could have found something like that, why couldn't I? And it just, time flew by. 6 months later, I had gotten casted. I was gonna reject because I actually had so many things going on, traveling wise. I was supposed to go to France with my family, and then I was supposed to go to Japan the next month. So it was gonna be a conflict timing wise. But then, long story short, our trip to France got canceled literally the day before we were supposed to leave because of my parents' passports. And then that just kind of opened the door to me participating because it was like a chain reaction of events that just snowballed. And then it led me to actually participating. So it was a very much type of meant to be moment, and very grateful that Johnny and I were able to do it. So
That's incredible. So basically, if your parents' passport, like there was no issue, you would never have been on the show. Just
yeah, literally. Yeah. It's funny because their passports were going to expire May of that year. We were supposed to go in March. And so because they had not met that 3 month passport validity requirement that is required, then we weren't able to travel because it was too close to that deadline, I guess, which we didn't know. And this was also post-COVID traveling. So getting back into the groove of things and, so all that fun stuff. So that happened, and it just kind of opened like a chain of reaction of events, I guess.
that's cool. Well, I hope you get to go to France. I know a thing or two about France, as you can hear from my accent.
Yeah. Well, we actually ended up going with Johnny later on. So my family, and Johnny and I went in October later that year after we had gotten married. So it ended up working out, and
Full circle.
loved it. We loved it, literally full circle.
That's amazing. And so you said that the process is kind of like rigorous to get on the show. Like how, like what type of interviews, like how do they select someone? Like, can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, there's different interview processes that I guess you go through. Video, you also have to make sure that, mental health wise, you're good to go on it since you're being on global television. And not only that, but I remember we had to fill out a long, long questionnaire. It was very extensive. I remember it was 222 questions, and it basically encompassed everything of what you wanted in a marriage and like all the pillars where people could not mesh well or where it could mesh, like, politics, religion, finances, like big things like that, where it could like deter people from getting together, or if people are aligned in those like large topics, then, it could work out. So it was more than that. Those are like, some of the ones that they talked about, but there were several things that it dove into, which honestly made me think of my like what I really wanted in a partner. And I feel like that was honestly before starting the experiment, kind of the beginning of the experiment, really like looking within myself and like knowing, like I already knew what I wanted in a partner, but really diving into these serious topics that I feel like get brushed under the rug in day-to-day dating.
Speaking of serious topic on the show, which full disclaimer, I haven't seen this season, but
Yeah.
apparently you talk about your little brother being autistic quite a bit.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about your brother and your relationship with him and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my brother, I call him my wish upon the star because I literally wished upon the star for him. It's like a magical story to this day. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. But when I was young, so I was born in Puerto Rico, but my parents and I moved here when I was around 5 years old. And so it was a very isolating experience as a kid, coming to a place that you don't know the language, you don't know anybody, you have no family but your parents. It was a time where, obviously, as a child, I wanted a little sibling to play with. And I remember one day we were over at my parents' friend's house and I was waiting. They were doing like their eternal long goodbyes. And I was in the car and I looked up at a star and I said, God, I wish that you give me a little brother. I don't want a little sister because then she'll steal my clothes because I was a little fashionista back then. And I was like, I want a little brother so I can play with and like, just have a friend. And literally that same night is when my mom got the pregnancy test. And then she found out she was pregnant. And then later on, she found out she was having a boy. So I call him my wish upon a star. He's my everything. He's like my little soulmate. Like we have a very special, unique bond. And yeah, he's my everything. And so in the show, I talked about him heavily because I care deeply. I'm very family oriented and I care deeply about my family. And I talked to Johnny about, hey, I have a little brother who's on the spectrum. I still call him my little brother, even though he's a grown man, but to me, he's my little brother. But that he's on the spectrum and that, he's still in that process of adulthood where he could be fully independent and he's still trying to figure that out and what that looks like for him. But there is a possibility that I might need to be a caretaker for him in the future. My dad is his legal guardian at the moment, just to have protection over him, because I feel like once you're past 18, there are certain protections that, one can lose as an individual, and it's scary. And, as a family, we're super protective over him. And so if something were to happen to my dad, hypothetically speaking, and this is where I kind of just started putting all these hypotheticals on Johnny, is like, what would that look like? Would you be there to support me? And Johnny was very, open to learning more, open to being there and not pushing me out, because I feel like there's some, people that are just not educated in the topic and just would not, out of fear, would not want to move forward. And not only that, I also have a lot of family members that live in my parents' household that are elderly. So it was another topic that wasn't shown that I also talked to Johnny about, like, what would that role look like of being a caretaker for my brother, but also for my elderly family members that really mainly depend on my dad. And so it was, a very good point in assessing Johnny's character and if he was a good partner for me in the long term. And I mean, fast forward, I'm very grateful that he's proven to be that. David, my little brother, he is obsessed with him. And
Oh.
um, Yeah, they have such a beautiful bond, and that's always something. I mean, when I feel like when one looks for a partner, they want somebody that meshes perfectly and seamlessly with the family, and I feel like that's exactly what's happened. And so, yeah, I'm just very grateful that everything played out the way that I feel like it was meant to.
I mean, that's awesome that he followed through, because that's one thing to say, yeah, of course, I don't mind, and
Exactly.
you live by his word, so that's good to hear.
Literally.
So you guys are 5 years apart with your brother? You said you were
So
5.
we're 7 years apart. I had moved at 5, but it wasn't until I was 7 that my family had him. So, or my mom had him, I guess.
Oh, that's funny. That's the gap between my kids too. What was it like for you to have a little brother that's autistic? Because when you're a child, your understanding is obviously different than when you're an adult. So when
Yeah,
did you
absolutely.
first notice like the differences?
I think it was when he was about 3, 4 years old. I was probably about 10, 11, around that time frame when he was starting to learn how to speak. And then um, my parents noticed early on that he had a speech impediment, and then we would go to um, therapy for that. And then later on, he had gotten diagnosed that he was also on the spectrum. And so I feel like my parents broke it down for me in the most digestible way because I was still a child, but being the eldest child at the same time, I feel like it was necessary for them to kind of, because I mean I like to be aware of what's going on, and I'm always asking questions, and that's something that's never changed since I was a kid till now. And so I feel like they, let me know while also understanding how his development was going to continue in his early age. So that's kind of how I started understanding what was going on.
And your parents, like, how did they talk about it? I mean, it seems like they were pretty open from the start, like they were not trying to hide it, and they knew something was going on right away, and they got the help they needed. Because I've heard a lot of stories of like, parents who were not like very accepting at the beginning or who didn't know how to find help, but doesn't seem to be your experience.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's still in our society very taboo. And then also being Latina, I feel like in our culture, there's not a lot of recognition for it and openness to talk about it. It's kind of swept under the rug. So I'm very grateful that my dad and my mom like really had those conversations with me, and while also trying to understand how to provide for him where he would flourish. And so I'm very grateful for how they, handled it, because I know that some people just don't really, unfortunately, know how to handle it.
Yeah, I had someone on the podcast who's Latina too, and she was telling me about the culture being different, and she struggled. She got diagnosed as an adult. Her daughter was diagnosed, but there's still a lot of stigma. And being
Oh,
French myself, like you would think France is this wonderful country, but there is a lot of stigma around autism in France, a lot more than in the US too. So it's really interesting for me to hear about those cultural differences.
oh yeah, for sure.
What do you wish people understood about autism, and more specifically like the being a sibling, like the experience of being a siblings to someone on the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I just wish more people were educated and like cared enough to learn, not just about autism, but like just other topics too, just so that they can understand people better and their peers better. And that's where I feel like it stems from education. Once there's education in a topic, there's more understanding, and there's not much of this stigma and like this negative talk around the topic. So I feel like that would be one thing. And then also just admiring and just celebrating differences. I feel like somebody's uniqueness is what makes a person, and I feel like My brother, I admire the way that he speaks so boldly. He has no filter and he'll say things like it is. And some people, might not like that. We've experienced that sometimes, but I don't care. Like, that's my favorite trait about my brother. He will say things as it is, he will not care. And I think it's something that it teaches us how can we grow in certain departments where we get in our own heads and and that's the thing, everybody's different. It's a spectrum for a reason. And so um it's just like learning and celebrating, everybody's uniqueness, truly.
So tell us, what's the most inappropriate thing he's ever said, something that really made you laugh?
Oh, I think when I was young, I think he had said something about, it was a bald guy that was walking, and he had said something about, I don't know, something about, I forgot what it was, that it was not the most appropriate, but it was so funny because it was just like he was very young, and so he didn't really understand. But now it's like he understands certain things that maybe it's best not to say, but like he'll still say things boldly and loudly and like make sure that he's heard. And that's something I truly respect because I feel like there's certain comments that like one can make when they're younger, like for example, like that might shy him away from speaking up and overall. But I just feel like he is just so funny when he says certain things, and I'm glad that he hasn't lost that sense about him and that he still, will respectfully, say things out loud as he should.
Gotta love the honesty for sure.
Yeah.
So going back to the show, what was the most surprising part of filming for you? Like, was there something you didn't expect going into the show?
Yeah, let's see. I just don't think I realized how quickly you could actually fall for somebody because you sign up for the experiment, you know what you're getting into, but then when you're actually in it, it's very like, wow, like this is real. Like, you know, I feel like sometimes, especially before going on it and like having watched it to like see how the show went about, I feel like it's typical for as a viewer to question what's going on, if it's like actually true, like is there genuine feelings happening? And I realized that communication and connecting through that communication where there's no limits, if you don't allow there to be limits, I feel like true bonds can form and can flourish from that. And I feel like I didn't really realize how much that would impact our relationship fast forward to the present, where we still have those traits of fully communicating and like being open and honest and vulnerable with each other, because I feel like that's kind of how we started our relationship with, you know what I mean? And so I feel like it definitely built a foundation that I didn't really realize could happen. But it's beautiful to see that, it could.
You think you would have fallen in love with Johnny if it was you had met him outside of the show, or was there something about this setting that made you fall even harder?
That's a good question because you never really know. I truly do feel like had it not been for Love is Blind, we would have found each other at some point. Because there were so many signs for him, for me, that I just feel like there were so many things aligned for us to meet at some point. But I feel like there is a bond that comes from fully being yourself and being fully vulnerable and communicating that with somebody else, with like having no filters, no bound, like it literally is yourself. If you allow yourself to be that point, because you can go on the experiment and also not choose to do that. But I feel like because we both actually took it seriously and we decided that we were going to be our most authentic self, we were able to really get to know each other. I feel like in the regular dating scene, a lot of these important hardcore conversations are not really talked about until like years later into a relationship, when marriage is being considered. And that could make or break a relationship. So I feel like even though we did it backwards, I feel like it kind of set that foundation. But I don't know. I like to think that we would have met each other had it not been for Love is Blind.
Seems like in your life you have a lot of signs, like, you know, the passport and then the wish upon a
No, literally. It's crazy.
might have, yeah. And so how has your life changed since Love is Blind? Like, I mean, personally, professionally, emotionally, like, and is there anything you're working on that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things is that it has given us the ability to connect with other people. I feel like even just having the topic being talked about, I had so many messages come in telling me like this is not a topic that's talked about on reality TV ever. And so the fact that we were giving visibility to that is heartwarming, but also the connections that we've been able to make from that. For example, we have been working with a smaller bilingual nonprofit here in Charlotte that started about a year ago because I feel like I haven't really seen a lot of, within our culture, I feel like there's still not a lot of conversations being had. And so I've been a part of the board of directors for that to kind of help um, get it more known. But just really connecting with individuals around the city has been really impactful and just worldwide too. And yeah, I feel like that's like my favorite part of everything that's happened since. I feel like it's just connecting with people, and I think that's the most beautiful part of life. So.
Did you have a big social media following before you went on the show, or did that come with the show?
No, not at all. That came with the show for sure. I didn't think it would go like that, but I
Yeah.
feel like after season 6, that's when I don't know, like I feel like it was a huge season, but I didn't really think that it would get to that point. You know what I mean? So it was very crazy to like witness in real time.
Well, why don't you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me at Amy Tiffany, AMYTIFFANY on Instagram, and then the same, but with one extra Y on TikTok. And then we also have, Johnny and I have a YouTube channel named The McIntyre Fam. So McIntyre is MCINTYRE, and then just fam. And that's where we kind of document our travel adventures, but um, hopefully we'll kind of expand to other kind of content there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Amy, and I hope we get to do a lot more as part of your Team 20 activation.
Yes, thank you so much. It's honestly been an honor, and I hope that I can continue my involvement with Team 20 and with Autism Speak. So, thank you again so much.
Thank you.